the market demands automation, and automation, it's in every industry now, and it's arriving to architecture as well.
That was a small snippet from today's episode with our guest all the way from Colombia, Nicolas Rawitscher Torres. And you guessed it right. This is an episode all about computational design, automation, cybernetics, and everything related to technology and architecture. Let me give you a brief about Nicolas to give you some more context. So he completed his Bachelor of Architecture from Universidad de Los Andes in Colombia in 2015, post which he went on to work for MAD Architects in Beijing and also 3XN Architects in Copenhagen. And he also pursued his Master's in Architecture and Urbanism, also known as the DRL Program in Architectural Association London. And he very recently joined Zaha Hadid Architects in the computational team. So congrats to you, Nicolas. This episode is recorded prior to him joining Zaha Hadid, so just want to congratulate him. And he also worked for Fojab Code in Malmö, Sweden. So he's had quite a journey traveling across various countries and also exploring so much into computation. So we are going to dive deep into the world of computation in this episode. I surely learned a ton from interviewing Nicolas and also built a newfound passion for learning computational design because it seems to be the future and it seems to be where most of us are headed. Plus, it's a great asset to your portfolio going forward. So for more on the episode, like podcast show notes, I've written quite a lot for this episode in our show notes with relevant links. So if you want to explore even more about computation, then this podcast show note for this episode is the go-to resource. You can head to archeon.com/41. That's archeon.com/41. Now, without further ado, let's head to the episode, dive deep into what computation is, and hopefully by the end of the episode, you too would get inspired to get into this awesome space. Let's go.
You're about to enter the Archeon Podcast. India's first and very own architecture podcast, where you'll hear the insights, experiences, and journeys from India's leading architects. No matter what your skill level is, together we'll build on our knowledge and share architecture's greatest stories ever told. Now, here's your host, Manish Paul Simon.
All right. So before we get into software development and how you transition to that, give us a brief background about yourself, where you're from, and how you got into architecture.
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Colombia, so that's Colombia in South America.
Nice.
And I studied architecture there at the University of the Andes. It's funny because at first, I think I didn't really have a clear idea why I was going to study architecture. Mm-hmm. But what I do remember back then is that I had the idea to develop, let's say, a more equitative and properly designed social housing. So that was kind of my intention. I still believe in that nowadays, of course. But that was kind of my initial dream of why to study architecture, but I didn't really have,
the contacts or the network to make it happen. No?
Of course. I mean, my family. I'm the only architect.
Nice.
But I don't think that actually really matters. But I think when you're young, you're kind of just exploring a little bit as well, and I think there's a few people that kind of are born knowing what they're going to do, right? I'm going to study this which I think it's actually quite, I think that's quite a privilege to have as well. I think my university, as I think most undergraduate architecture degrees in the world, of course, is very, very conservative. So, for example, most of the teachers are only concerned about modernism. So that's as far as you get in the history of architecture. But then, of course, they teach it as a very nostalgic, as that's the, the one and only way, and let's say the absolute truth. So I remember we had a one semester course on Le Corbusier.
Okay.
And it was, the teacher was highly obsessed, and sometimes she got so excited, which was also quite beautiful to see anyway. Somebody get excited and passionate about what they're doing, but she sometimes cried in class.
Okay,
so
nice.
Let's say the level of, and then of course, like, the approach to design was, very traditional. So you had your drawing tools, and teachers preferred students to draw plans by hand. And of course, you had to take the first levels of drawing courses. So the program was very, let's say, history kind of theory driven, but of course until modernism, and then purely, as they would say, based on design. So of course, I think that's most architecture programs based on project experience, and that's how supposedly students learn, right?
Yeah.
You bring a project to the teacher, and then the teacher sits down and with a piece of how do you say this, see-through paper? I forgot.
Yeah, butter sheets. We call it butter
exactly.
sheets here.
Yeah. Yes, exactly, butter sheets. And then the guy will critique your design, scribble here, scribble there with, a red pen or whatever. And then you go back and redo everything, draw everything from scratch, right? Remake your model, right? Especially in the first semesters when you don't, maybe first semester when you're not yet so literate with AutoCAD or, laser cutting. And then, of course, they don't teach. There's no like AutoCAD course and that. I don't know now, but when I started, there wasn't any like really strong digital fundamentals. So they did, because they didn't really promote it as well. So there was no AutoCAD courses, no Photoshop courses, nothing. So, but students.
Don't you feel like the biggest architects these days also come from that traditional background? I don't know whether we need to change that system or maybe add on to that system.
Yeah, well, I think if you want, we can dig in a little later on that topic, because I think it's very interesting to talk about like the architectural education as well. I definitely think it should change, and it is changing. Of course, not in every place. There's a few places that, of course, are changing this paradigm, because then we will fall way behind, as a profession. And yeah, I actually have quite a radical stance with this. So yeah, for example, so in terms of, if students got interested in Rhino, for example, you had to learn it on your own. Well, which is not a problem, but it would be nice if universities, or let's say from more traditional countries like ours, I suppose, really try to catch up and think how they're educating architects. And I think that's very important. So like I was always very kind of frustrated. So I remember I spent always long times in the library just roaming around in the architecture library. By the way, like we had a very good one. So that's a big bonus point. So I started to encounter like Rem Koolhaas, more of the 90s people, Greg Lynn, for example. I remember I also started to bump in, and this was all casually, like Jonah Friedman, which also was a great person.
But when did you pick up on the software, like since it was a traditional course, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm beginning to tell you. It was through these characters,
Right.
When I was roaming in the library and finding, Koolhaas's texts, or MVRDV. Of course, these are far away from what's now computational design, but they were people that were, saying different things that I was getting taught in school, and I thought it was extremely interesting. So one thing led me to another, then I found Zaha Hadid, for example. And so I was always very curious, and I liked to read about the, architectural theories of the 90s, or which of course were proposing a radically different model than modernism. And then, I slowly just by curiosity, I started with Rhino as well. And actually, my first interaction with Grasshopper, there was actually this professor in the school, which was, in our architecture department. And he for some reason also fiddled a little bit with Grasshopper. He was probably the only one. So he once did try to do a Grasshopper course, where I think it was like a very, very introductory course to Rhino at nights. It was really late, like at 7, so kind of inconvenient. And then in one of the courses, he showed Grasshopper. That was like, when was that? Maybe like in mid-2013s.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what year, but probably mid-2013s, I think, or early 2013s. And then I was like shocked, like, oh my God, what's this? What's this connecting stuff? I was like, oh shit. So I got very overwhelmed, I remember. Then after that, I said, I'm going to try this because, it looks interesting. I think it's worth to try. And then I just started to pick it up. Of course, I didn't know how to learn this. You kind of...
Yeah, there were not many resources also, right?
Well, yes, they were, but I didn't really know what I was really doing at the beginning with this when I first encountered it. And so I kind of learned it in school, kind of in a messy manner, just experimenting on projects. But I wasn't there really paying attention to the fundamentals of what you need to know in order to really understand what's happening and what you're doing, right? But at least I was kind of, exploring and, doing different things as well than than the rest of my friends and stuff like that. Of course, some teachers didn't really like it.
Okay.
So, that's also the thing with architecture education. It's so subjective.
Yeah.
So it really depends on how the teacher is, what he thinks. It's not like mathematics or a science where you have one answer. Of course, there's multiple ways of
deriving
achieving
the answer. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's one answer, wrong or right? So it's much more objective. And that's, and with architecture is much more subjective. Art is much more subjective, but architecture also has that inside.
Yeah, but we do have our set of constraints and all that, like a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What you say, it's very important. That's actually one big distinction between architecture and art, right?
Yeah.
We have actually physical constraints, we have structural constraints, we have environmental constraints, material constraints. We don't want to waste so much material. Tons of, it's a complex, many variables to optimize for, basically.
So you must have oriented your thesis also in the computational space, right?
Yeah, I tried. It was actually pretty crazy because I tried to do, it was like kind of a skyscraper, but I attempted to do like everything parametrically modeled.
Nice.
So I started from a point, and then I tried to do like all the structure, every single beam, and I tried to also like optimize the generation of the volume through Galapagos. Looking back, it wasn't really like, of course, properly done because I was, exploring the tool. But I liked actually to try to parametrically model like, a more complicated structure and actually getting it to work in a pretty decent manner. So that was pretty satisfying for me. Of course, like, the script at the end was just a mess, full of spaghetti wires and
right.
super slow to update. So that was really, really annoying. that part. That it was, you change something and edit, the script is, because probably it wasn't even properly written back then, that Grasshopper script. So crunching numbers and waiting a couple of, I don't remember how much it was, but you had to wait quite a long time to see the model update.
Awesome. So I guess post that you wanted to pursue further, right, on this space and this path.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I mean, I knew I didn't really want to fully develop my professional career in Colombia. So actually my big dream was always to do to go to famous offices, so I was always trying to go for OMA, for example, MVRDV, UN Studio,
They have all their base in Colombia?
No, of course not.
Okay.
So no, I mean, they have, I was applying to go to their home base. So, in Rotterdam, Amsterdam, or, wherever these offices were, because of course I was really interested in their theory back then and the work they were producing, and was very influential for me. So I really wanted to have that experience to work with, people that were in that kind of mindset, right? So yeah, I eventually got in Mad Architects.
Oh, nice.
That was just before I graduated. I actually didn't even assist to my graduation. I said I'm just gonna just go right away.
Okay.
I was in January, I believe it was, of 2016. Yeah, so at the beginning, and that was actually an internship there. I stayed there 7 months. I don't remember properly right now. It was a mind-blowing experience. There, of course, I met people, architects from different schools, which I really admired.
Nice.
Like SciArc or the AA or the Angevante. People. So I was really, I was full of adrenaline. Really like a sponge.
And you got to work with Mayan Song as well?
Well, he's usually never at the office, but I did actually, I was allowed to go to one of the meetings with him.
Oh, nice.
To present actually a sketch I did for a competition. So I remember I was really hyped. It was pretty nice. But with these architects, you rarely get to speak to them properly, especially if you were, just an intern. It's more like senior project leaders or people that get to interact with them more. But he's usually, at least when I was there, usually outside of the office, traveling and, giving lectures and all of that these types of, architects do usually.
But they do play the key role in design, right? Just want to get a gist of what it's like working in MAD and all these big firms.
Well, MAD is savage. There's 3 partners, right? Yusuke, and then Chun, and Mayan Song. And Yusuke is the one that basically, I don't know if I should say it this way, but he's the one that's staying in the office and actually kind of, doing the dirty work, let's say.
Right.
He's not really traveling so much, giving lectures. He's there, kind of the design responsible inside. So basically, Mayan Song just does the typical architect thing, which he sends some sketches, some really just some squiggles, and then you have a whole team of designers trying to sketch out what he sent in Maya, right?
Right.
Or Maya, Rhino, depends, of course, on the person. And then they upload this into WeChat, right, into the group. And then he just says, "Oh, this is crap. Oh, I like this. Develop this further. Oh, I like this other option. Develop it further." Right? And then it's this continuous, in my opinion, very traditional process as well of design. Very top down, very traditional. Of course, back then I didn't see it that way, but so that's kind of the process. And then Yusuke, the partner, also sits down and models and does proposals, and he also shares the workload. So I like to see it from a senior, from a partner especially, because most partners, they don't really sit down and also do these kinds of work, but Yusuke does. I don't know if he still does, probably. So working hours were crazy. The office never closes.
Oh shit.
Basically 24 hours. You don't have weekends. But I think it's also because of this model of working, right? It's very iterative, but not in such a smart way. So they pushed the limit. So I remember, there was this endless competition, and we were always changing at last minute everything. So, I spent a couple of 24-hour periods in the office.
Whoa.
Others people spent 48 hours. It was just crazy. So yeah, you just had a bunch of passionate people, passionate designers that just gave it all. They didn't care about weekends or anything. They just were there. So yeah, it had an interesting environment. Like, you totally just were consumed by it,
Yeah.
So
I don't think anyone would have been like demotivated working for them, because what they were doing was also a pretty high-end architecture, right? Because working
in a sense.
Working for like 24, 48 hours is like a bummer for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, that, for me, my opinion, I think that's just shouldn't happen. That's inhumane, and So there was also the period where I had a big transition in terms of using Grasshopper, let's say, on parametric modeling. Just to clarify, back then I didn't even know of the existence of of this proper concept, computational design. For me, it was just parametric modeling.
Yeah.
Like, there was this guy there, and back then I was really amazed because he was the first Grasshopper guy that I saw live, that I was like, amazed. I thought he was really talented. So I learned actually a lot by him. So I polished up, a lot of my skills there. I could also do some different proposals for project, like for facade panels or like analysis tools there. Of course, like, just to clarify, back then, MAD is not, or wasn't, I'm not sure if now, a very parametrically driven office. It's more like a very formal office. So it's just,
right.
You do the model in Maya, you transfer it to Rhino, and then you do here and there a few like Grasshopper tools, especially for facades. But it's not like a form finding office. It's very formal. You do the form, and then you figure out how you squeeze in the correct areas, the correct, apartment layouts. So
interesting.
And I would say this is quite typical for a lot of offices as well, but I think this is changing as well. I think this is
so they didn't have their own BIM team then, I guess, right?
No BIM team. They had some CAD people, but also in China things work differently. I think all those drawings. Again, I don't know if they've changed it since then, because that was 4 years ago. But the offices are not responsible for doing construction documentation. So this is all done by a contractor.
Oh wow, okay.
So they didn't have a BIM team. I guess maybe in LA they do, in these other offices they have, but not in Beijing, not in the main headquarters. Let's say lots of manual work, manual labor, time consuming, redoing things, remodeling, redrawing, re-rendering. So that's basically what was happening over there. And then 3XN was very different, of course. You have the Nordic working culture, the office. It's beautiful as well.
So this was also an internship, or was it like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to do internships before starting the master's, actually, the DRL.
Cool.
So so 3XN was totally different experience, actually. Actually very talented people as well. Work-life balance, like very, very different. And they do very good architecture as well, in my opinion. So like, that proves that you don't need to work 48 hours without stopping to make good architecture. It just proves that sometimes the architectural industry has bad staff management, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But 3XN is very good in this sense. And there I also met another of the parametric designers of 3XN, and I also learned a lot from him. And then I also, quickly, my first project was a competition in France. And then I had to do some facade proposals for a building, and I said, no way, I'm not going to do this by hand. This is insane.
Okay.
So that, I just did, the whole facade for that building myself, in Grasshopper. And then after that, I basically became, part of their computational team.
Nice.
Of course, I mean, not full-time as I would like to do, but I was very involved as well on, developing. I mean, 3XN mostly works on parametric facade models as well. So that's their main use of Grasshopper, at least when I was there. So yeah, I mean, that was very gratifying. I worked in this first competition in France, in Lille. Then I worked on in a big competition project in Frankfurt, office building and housing building.
And how did you approach these competitions? Was it more of a collaborative approach?
Yeah, at first, yes. So it's very inclusive. So everybody designs, and that's very nice. It's a whole team effort. They're very team driven, right? And then of course, later when then the people that were more talented at Grasshopper will then take the the parametric part of the project, and then other people took care of the other parts. And then after that, UN Studio won that one.
Okay.
Also worked on a very nice competition at Concert Hall in Munich. That was really nice.
And the renders are pretty amazing. I'm just looking at those in LinkedIn. Yeah. Did you do the renders as well?
No. The 3XN has they have their own team for rendering.
Okay.
But I was working on the hall. So I did some scripts to like automatically place the chairs and then the people for the rendering guys. Like a very simple thing at the beginning for sightseeing as well. So you can, that was actually my first C# component I did. So, you have some special seating angles, it's like sidelines you have to respect. So I quickly sketched like, a little component that let other people say, okay, like, if I do the stairs this height, I'm in trouble. So it was like quite a quick evaluation tool for people as well to use. And then I also worked on the foyer, the main hall. If you see the renders,
kind of
like this wooden thing with some curved things
like,
coming in. Yeah. So I actually did that part. That was
oh wow,
pretty cool, and part of the interior hall as well.
But did they realize it as well?
No, we lost. I mean, we didn't lose, but we got fourth place. Which
UN Studio had won then.
No, that was in Frankfurt. The one that won, I don't remember, but in my opinion, we should have won. The other ones were not so nice, in my own opinion.
But what's your take on architectural competitions? Like, is it biased, or is it actually with proper scrutiny that someone is selected as the winner?
I'm not really sure, actually. I couldn't say. I don't really know. I think they try to be as unbiased as possible, but at the end, I'm not really sure how. I think there's lots of criteria, like how expensive it is and all this stuff. Of course, the tastes of the juries, if they like the design or not, which is again, as we said, subjective. And actually in 3XN, I had a big transition in terms of computational design.
Yeah, you mentioned C#, right?
Yeah, let's say there I kind of just emerged in me that I didn't really want to do like more of the traditional side of the work of an architect, which is lots of manual labor, redrawing, and I felt kind of frustrated as well.
A lot of us do.
Yeah. So then, back then, I also started actually on my own time. I first started with between C# and Python, actually. In my opinion, it was quite messy. Because again, like I was discovering my path. Like, they didn't have anybody like saying, "Hey, come here and code with me. I'll teach you," or "Hey, this is how some resources." No, so I was kind of like discovering my path and saying, "Okay, how can this be useful, or how can I learn?" So there's actually a very good quote from It's from a person in MIT called Sigmund Papert. And, you know, he always said, like, you have to learn how to learn. And that's really key, actually, in everything that you're self-teaching yourself. So, yeah, I started there, let's say, into this world of programming. Yeah, and then actually when I got to the DRL, maybe I jumped here ahead. But let's say I'll go back in time just for one moment. Like,
yeah, sure.
Well, I was also in Colombia, and, you know, going back to, you know, reading about these 90s, let's say, quote unquote, digital era in architecture.
Yeah.
I don't know how I actually remember how I came across the design research lab at the Architectural Association, but I came across their page and I was like, oh my God. I don't know if you have seen it, Manish. Have you ever tried to log in?
The DRL website?
Yes.
Yeah, we did have a guest from DRL Program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Who was it actually? Maybe
this is Sushant Verma. He's the founder of RATLab Studio. So he's teaching parametric stuff right now in India.
Yeah. I've heard about RATLab Studio. So, I mean, I was amazed, you know, like, what are these robots? What are these things? Like, what the hell is happening? So I was like obsessed with this program, blindly obsessed. So my idea was always to do this master's. After I left 3XN, you know, I went back to Colombia a little bit. And then after that, I started in September. So I left 3XN in July. Yes, July of 2017. Hope I'm missing one day.
It says May 2017.
Okay. Yeah, May 2017. Exactly. Yeah. And then in September, I started in the DRL. And then there, it was another like hype moment, like boom, you know, like, you know, I really admired Theodore Spiropoulos, for example. I mean, he's the director, you know, Shajay Bhushan. Back then, Patrick as well. I mean, I read his first volume before starting. So, which I think, I mean, I was very happy, right? Very excited with, you know, to meet cool people, etc. And then there also was the first time I had like a moment to concentrate on coding, which was actually one of my main outcomes of my head that I wanted to do. Like, I really want to dig into this. Of course, in the DRL, I mean, you know, they teach people things. You have workshops to learn Maya, Rhino, Grasshopper, some coding and all of this. But, you know, you really need to spend the time in it. I mean, I think any tutorial is quite, you know, it's superficial. Like, you really need to spend time by yourself.
Yeah, and you only learn when you actually start applying those methods or techniques or skills. Right? Yeah.
And like a big thing to like clarify here is that the DRL, I mean, now I say it now. I mean, my mindset has changed a lot over the years. And I think, is that, I mean, even though the DRL is an excellent program, if somebody's actually very interested in the computational side, like the technical aspects of coding, of course, the DRL is not that place because it's an architecture program, you know, so you have to design. Of course, you use these tools, but you're not, let's say, technically focused on understanding really what these tools do. That's like an important point. But other than that, I mean, it's a great program, great people, as I said.
There's a lot of focus on ideation, right?
Yes. So there's like a focus on trying to approach things in a different way. I mean, they have their own agenda. Each 4 years, they change. So now, for example, they have the future of work, the future of culture, and the future of living. And they're all radically different studios in a sense, but, you know, all the tutors share like some similar concepts for, of course, to sustain the program. Patrick has his own ideas, of course, of what he thinks architecture is. Shajay, you know, he has some nice ideas about co-living, right? And affordable housing, mass customization with, you know, trying to simulate these interactions in gaming environments. And then, Theo has his own studio of trying to create, different types of emergent behavior through, modular robotics. I don't think if I say modular, describe his work as modular robotics, but understanding architecture as a distributed system, not like as a static building, but something that can change over time and adapt. Right? That's basically,
So you guys were at a whole new level when you joined DRL.
What do you mean by the whole new level?
Like compared to your traditional architecture course, right?
No, of course. I mean, all people basically joining have most people come from similar background. I would say most architects come from a similar background. For example, Shajay Bhushan, he also came from a very interesting background, and then just by coincidences of how life works, he just ended up, later on digging into code and then doing what he's doing now. So for example, in terms of all this thing of software development, in the DRL, I became much more radical in terms of this. Then I really said, okay, this is actually what I would like to do, right? As a profession. Because I also became very interested in all the previous work that was done, for example, after World War II. People like Alan Turing, right, or John von Neumann were thinking a very different model towards computers and computation. They were interested in seeing, for example, why, for example, a sunflower or how does a flower grow from a seed, right? So then, for example, Alan Turing did this famous paper called Morphogenesis, where he was actually trying to derive, say, a mathematical model for how things emerge in nature, right? So, it was all very interconnected. Like, AI is not new. It's like these people started to think about it in the 40s. For example, when Alan Turing joined the Bell Labs, he met Claude Shannon, and then they started there to think, how can a computer think? How can a computer learn to derive patterns? Right, because they were in the Bell Labs, they were interested in cutting noise, from signals. So they were thinking about this back then. So this was a huge revolution, right? And then the MIT started to pioneer. They headed the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab. With Marvin Minsky was the one that founded this. So, I was very, very interested in all these characters. So, I started to really be interested, let's say, in the technical part of programming, but also in the theoretical part of programming.
So, a lot of math as well.
Yes, of course. I knew, if once you start actually digging in, there's various levels that you can engage with a machine, right? You have the visual programming level, which is the most, let's say, superficial level where you can engage with this. That's why I don't really like to hear this term, but they say visual programming is for designers. I think that's kind of
But at least a start for us, right?
I don't really agree with that.
Okay.
But I will tell you that comes back to my idea on education and architecture. But so then you have, of course, once you start writing text, actual code, then you really need to pay attention to details. And then, of course, as architects, we worked in the world of geometry, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you need to really understand, for example, at least in a superficial level, vector mathematics, right?
Yeah, coordinates and all that jazz.
Geometry, planes, right? At least so you understand, for example, why do you need a plane to define, in Grasshopper, you can derive planes from points, right? And then you can, for example, place objects in in the plane, but then if the plane it follows the curvature of a surface, then you have the normal vector, which is the c-axis of the plane, etc., etc. So just you begin to understand how, kind of the world of computational geometry works. And then, of course, if you begin to get more and more and more interested in this, well, then you need to brush up, of course, in algebra, right? Which actually that's...
Going back to school as well.
Actually, right now, I'm relearning a lot of this stuff. I'm also close to entering calculus again.
Nice.
Because you really need to refresh and I think learn everything with a new perspective. And kind of actually conscious on the beauty of mathematics as well. So yeah, you really need to put a lot of time. It's not like you watch a tutorial on a Saturday and then you're like a coder. No, it's not like that. It takes a lot of dedication. It takes a lot of passion. It takes a lot of, curiosity as well. Mathematics is, people that say you don't need mathematics to code, I don't agree. You do need it because computers are constructed on logic, right? And on mathematics as well. So that's how programming languages work, right? They're logical sequences of instructions which you type and a computer executes it.
But how much of, since we are still in the architecture field, right? How much of overlap do you feel is there between coding, math, and architecture?
Well, for example, in terms of people that they're doing more of, let's say, computational design kind of part, of course, the overlap is, all of it is an overlap, again, because you're dealing with geometrical problems, right?
Yeah.
So then if you have a geometrical problem, you need to know, for example, the dot products and the cross products are very useful in a lot of these situations. So, it's an example. For example, if you have a polygon and then you want to find if a point is inside a polygon, well, a cross product and, for example, a vector projection to one of the lines will tell you if the point is inside or outside, for example. So you really need to, to start to understand these things. Of course, Grasshopper has these components, but if you really need someday to code your own routine, or you're just curious of why do I need a dot product or a cross product, for example, in terms of a computational geometry problem, then you'll start to think about these, these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
So what did you research on when you were part of the DRL program?
Yeah, well, we had, we did, like a distributed robotics that was in the air. So we actually developed, it was like some helium-based drones. We had like some machine learning model there to, make the thing learn how to fly. So that was made in Unity. And then we had all the population logic, like how these things become like a super organism, how these things come together, how these things redistribute themselves, which was more of the part I worked on. So yeah. So the idea wasn't like an air-based architecture that could always constantly reconfigure and redistribute itself in the city and could, interact with people and in a different way and all of this. That was basically the short story of our project. I have some videos of this in Vimeo and all of that. The robot also was pretty exciting. Yep.
And most of it, do you feel is like futuristic or?
Well, no, not really. As I said, all of these people were thinking about it 80 years ago. So, in the 40s, as I said, after the World War II, there was this movement, cybernetics, and then they were also thinking about about machines in a different way, also like biological entities, how can, kind of to model, to understand life processes through machines, for example, or or computational assemblages of these machines through simple rules, right, of interaction and all of this. So, it's not new. It looks new, of course, because now computers are cheaper and everything is much more accessible. So that's why everything looks new today, AI, and everybody's doing, machine learning. But it's not novel. But we can work through these problems because we have the technologies now to do so. Before, it was much harder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and this is my personal opinion. I feel that as an architect, we do need to really pick up on these skills because we are more effective and we have more value, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, I think it's just a personal approach. I mean, it's very hard to say. I mean, you cannot be like a Patrick Schumacher saying like, oh, parametricism is the only way out and this is the new style. I mean, no. Right? And you cannot say like architects that don't code, they're doomed. That's not, I mean, shouldn't be like this. I mean, of course, I think anybody should learn how to code, right?
Yeah, but don't you feel like a lot of that entry-level work would get automated or, because of these coders that we have less work as an architect?
Yes, I mean, that's true. Of course, like, let's say the market demands automation, and automation, it's in every industry now, and it's arriving to architecture as well. So yes, I mean, of course, you will need to, I mean, that's one part of computational design, or let's say computation, to automate things and tasks. But then there's also another part of, which is trying to maybe find a new way to approach problems, which is not then so easily described. So, for example, new algorithms.
Yeah.
Or to adapt, for example, algorithms from computer science into an architectural problem. That's I think, that's at least the part where I'm more interested in computation. Like automating tasks, is a part of it. But I mean, it's also dull. I mean, it's not the only end. And of course, you do need it because if you automate repetitive tasks, then architects can be more happy and and put their hands on and other problems. But in my opinion, it should not be seen only for automation as well, because
Yeah, I think, that's also a problem, right? Like a lot of us think that it's only restricted to automation, but it goes much beyond.
Yeah, it goes much beyond. I mean, there's many, interesting people saying, for example, it's not only about BIM, for example. This other interesting article as well, actually it was more of a critique by Daniel Davis, I think it was. I don't know if you saw it, criticizing the general, like, misuse of generative design and all the implications. So there's interesting positions that we need. There's people also being critical. We need this, but of course, as you said, architects, it would be good if there are more architects that are interested in this part, but then of course education has also to change. It cannot be so conservative. If it was me, like, engineers in my school, every engineer has to take 2 levels of programming, 2 semesters. Architects should do the same. Architects should have to take also the same levels of calculus as an engineer in university. There shouldn't be like courses like physics for architects. Like, what kind of ridiculous thing is this? There's no physics for architects. It's physics. There's no mathematics for architects. It's mathematics. You know what I mean? So Yeah, in general, I think yes, people should learn how to code. Children as well. I mean, it's kind of learning. It's like reading and writing. It's going to be part of the future to learn how to understand how the world works. Everything goes through machines, and otherwise, I think you kind of fall behind, right? You have to be able to understand how technology works in that level as well, so you can be technically literate, but also then you could be philosophically or intellectually more critical as well of where technology is going, and that's very important. Like for me it's shocking when I see like a 6-year-old kid texting in an iPhone. You know what I mean? What's this? So that's because of lack of technological education intellectually. And yeah, perhaps I like to fit in the technical part. Like if these kids were learning how to code, they will engage with technology in a different way. Maybe we're going to try to develop an app for iPhone or some cool game. And going back to Sigmund Papert, he actually developed, when was this? I actually wrote this down. I didn't write the date. I'm sorry. But I think, I don't remember the date, but it wasn't so long ago. I think in the 90s. But he developed a programming language called Logo. And the goal of this was to improve how children think and solve problems through coding, for example. And he was very interested in this. So he was a computer scientist, a mathematician, and he was the head of the MIT AI department. Right. And his special research was on learning theories, right? So I love Seymour Papert, and I think this is a very interesting approach, and I think it should be really applied just to the whole system of education, to architects, to small kids.
Yeah, and talking about AI and machine learning, there's not much which has been developed for the architecture profession, right?
Yeah, I mean it's very I think this is still kind of, even though it was 80 years ago being thought, we're still struggling with this because it's a very complicated problem. Again, architects, we're not trained as engineers, so it's very difficult to engage with machine learning models in the appropriate way. Like, I think either we start to change again how we are educated, but in the meantime, we also need to seek help from, engineers that are specialized in this. Like not even computer scientists that graduate, they all pursue that path because it's difficult. It's hardcore. Yeah. That's why their salaries are like 140,000 pounds a year, Yeah. It's because it's hardcore stuff. And I personally think that sometimes architects can be a little irresponsible on how they're using it. I mean, we're using it as a black box. And then there's so many new algorithms on machine learning, so many new, even developing a neural net is very complicated. What's the structure of your neural network to solve a problem? Of course, like in image recognition and number recognition, like that's an age-old problem. You already have the neural net structure out of the box. But if you have like a more complicated problem that nobody has done, how in the world an architect will be able to? It's impossible, I mean, one work that I did like was of Stanislas, which has been a boom in social media. I think he made a very interesting contribution with GANs. I mean, I'm sure he obviously did not code anything from scratch. I mean, he probably understood it sufficiently to compile different, I don't know what he used, of Keras or PyTorch or TensorFlow, but properly compile different GAN packages together, and produced an interesting piece of work, right? Very interesting piece of work that got him, far as now. And but yeah, I mean, definitely, I think that machine learning, it's a field we're exploring in all disciplines as well. I mean, not only architecture. But I think as architects, we do need to engage in mathematics in a more rigorous way, in a more deep way, to really grasp what this really actually even means, right? machine learning, a machine that learns and doesn't solve a problem explicitly, like a programmer doesn't tell it to do this. It learns how to do it through data, right?
Yeah.
That's a different way.
Yeah, I actually like the work of, I don't know if you heard of this person called Refik Anadol. He uses AI to generate art.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Refik does very interesting stuff as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the best part about getting into the space as an architect is a lot of architects don't really stick on to architecture. They move on to, some of them have joined Boston Dynamics and NASA, and they move on to other fields as well, right? Even especially in the automobile industry and working for Tesla and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I would love to do. I would love to jump outside of my industry one day. Because I think once you start coding and once you start to understand, at least, I mean, depends what you're going to do. But if you're going to jump in another industry doing computer graphic things, well, that's universal. It's not, meshes are meshes, right? There's not meshes for architecture.
Yeah.
So you can apply the same principles in any mesh and any NURBS surface. You can, code in any computer. You don't need a ruler or so yeah. So for example, in terms of a transition to a software developer, I like to be self-critical with this. Because computer science is a 4 years degree for a reason, right? Like you cannot just teach yourself computer science on your own time. Like you will take more than 4 years if you really try to follow strictly a curriculum, right?
Yeah.
And software development has many different aspects, many branches. There's web development and, mobile development, there's machine learning, there's like tons of stuff, APIs, there's new APIs all the time, new frameworks, how to hook up stuff, for example, with any type of cloud services. It's vast. You could never, it's insane. And also formally, there's two very important courses, I would say, or I think they have 2 modules of this in computer science, which is a data structures and algorithms course. And then they have like a more advanced version of this. And that's critical, like if you really intend to at least jump industry, you need to know these 2 subjects. Because what happens if you are in a technical interview and they say, okay, this is your problem, how will you solve it? If you try the brute force approach, okay, cool, but then they will say, how can you make it faster? You have, oh, by the way, this is your memory limitation. This is the time limitation. How would you do it? And then, mostly you're in a whiteboard with a marker and you don't even have a text editor. You have to know the concepts to write down like a pseudocode on the blackboard and respond to any type of questions these people may ask. And you have to understand this in a way that your solution seems technically agile to them, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that architects that code in the industry, I think very, very few are kind of at the level of a proper software developer.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I include myself. I mean, I'm always trying to learn, man. Every day I'm actually studying right now from algorithms and data structures book.
Oh, nice.
It's very complicated.
Do you do even online,
but
massive online courses like MOOCs or learning from Coursera or edX?
Yeah, well, right now I'm actually doing all my mathematics from Khan Academy because it's free.
Okay.
I downloaded this algorithms and data structures book from an MIT course.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I have a plan next year. I mean, this year my plan is to do, finish calculus and linear algebra.
Wow.
And then next year I want to do a Coursera course I'm just on machine learning by curiosity. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of courses I plan to do, but I just have to take it step by step. So first, for example, for me, it's doing this mathematics is essential, right? And and to the side, taking these computer science textbooks and understand how, people are trained in this curriculum, because then you become, of course, a much better programmer, If you know how to efficiently write an algorithm, or how to understand, for example, the running time of an algorithm, then you understand why programs are so slow, or why that script is so slow, and there are techniques that have been developed through years that, of course, they have to teach, and it's like they're the first basic courses of this computer science degree. So if somebody's gonna try to really make the transition to write code, it's something they really need to try to make the effort to understand. It depends on the individual, of course, Manish, because if you're already like in a leader position and you're leading a team, well, you're already, well, it's maybe you don't have to put so much effort on it, because you're already maybe in that position of being more like a team leader. Just depends individually of what you're trying to do, your own interests as well.
Yeah, but I'm sure like you're not doing coding and learning all the time, right? You still do party on the weekends and all that.
Yeah, at least one day in a week. But mostly like my daily routine. I wake up. Almost every day I try actually to wake up. I wake up at 6, and then I do my mathematics, right? I go to work. I come from work. I go to the gym. After the gym, I do some coding. It can be sometimes messy, Sometimes I do my my algorithms and data structures book and some exercises, or sometimes I do like side projects that I'm doing on my own, or just to keep like an athlete. An athlete needs to keep training. So it's the same with programming. Like you just cannot stop. And as I said, there's so many things to learn. Like you just cannot stop learning. Especially if you're like a self-taught programmer. You have to keep your head on the game.
All right. And how much of a hand do you have in BIM? Because I'm sure like the present firm which you work for also includes a lot of BIM workflows and all that, right?
Yes, Manish. The office is totally BIM driven. They're actually super organized with their BIM. They do everything in BIM. They have very skilled people on BIM as well.
Yeah, this is Fojab for the listeners. Fojab, right?
Yes, Fojab Architects, exactly.
Okay.
It's funny, Manish, because I don't know Revit, but I know how to code in Revit.
Awesome.
Which is, kind of contradictory. Probably if somebody listens to this will think I'm crazy. Nonsense. How can he code in Revit without knowing how to model in Revit? But actually, the first time I encountered with the Revit API was in Fojab. They said, hey, look, we want to start doing more BIM work with our computational design team. And here's a Revit book. Boom, 600-page Revit book from, I don't know. Yeah, okay. So I just skimmed through it, read some brief concepts, and then I went over to the, where they had the API section, and then, then I just checked the web page as well, and then I studied the API, and then I kind of, by studying the API, I kind of learned, I will say lightly, maybe how Revit, well, at least I learned how Revit works behind the scenes, right? So I kind of reversed engineer Revit. I'm not in. If you put me how to model something and manually and try to click this and the shortcut, I wouldn't know. But if you tell me, hey, I need to program this to do this, I'll say, okay, I know how to navigate my way in the API. I know how to program. I can do it, right? Of course, depends on the problem. Like if it's overly complex, well, you need to stop and really think. But it's something more like for automation, like, you kind of know right away almost how to do it. Of course, you need to plan and everything, but
I think that's interesting because having a background in software enables you to pick up on all Dynamo or PyRevit pretty easily, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for example, I really also enjoy doing my own Dynamo nodes. Again, it's C#, I do it in C#. I mean, I stopped Python a long time ago. I don't like Python actually.
Okay.
But yeah, I do them in C# and Visual Studio. Right now I'm actually working on a side project where I'm connecting. I'm putting up together quickly some pieces of code, but I'm transferring geometry from Grasshopper to Dynamo. So I'm converting them. Grasshopper has their own geometry types, right? And then Dynamo has their own geometry types. So I'm doing like some conversions right now. So for example, right now I'm transferring meshes. So I'm converting Rhino meshes to Dynamo meshes.
Nice.
For example, of course, point clouds are the easiest thing or NURBS curves from software to another one. And the nice thing is that you can transfer a mesh to Dynamo, and then it's a Dynamo mesh, so you can manipulate it there.
Yeah.
And then after that, you can push it back to Grasshopper, and then it's Grasshopper geometry, and you can keep doing whatever you need to do there, for example. So I think that's pretty cool. I mean, my intention, it's, you'd hook it up to Revit, to Dynamo, to Unity. The long project is do like a web API, so you can like send your data to the cloud and do some operations, and then get your data back in whatever format you need. So it's kind of like it's like a standalone library that communicates with different packages. That's what I'm playing around with. So yeah, I mean, it's once you know how to program, you can quickly, go into Unity, for example, or pick up on any other programming language, JavaScript, and if you want to do some web development at least. So I think it's a really nice thing. You're like flexible. You're not like bound to one thing.
Are you also into web development as a full stack developer or something along those lines?
I want to get into it. I mean, not so much on doing web pages, but I would really like to learn how to do proper web APIs. That's actually one of my projects. I mean, I don't know how I will have time to do all of this. But yeah, I would really like to get into that part. I would love to also learn how to do mobile development as well. Android, for example, would be cool. That's definitely something I would really, really like to try out.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, Nicholas, that was a pretty deep session that we had. A lot of interesting topics and a lot of technical jargon. I'm going to try linking most of it and like put up your work and also the people you spoke about. There would be few listeners who would be like really interested in the space but haven't yet started on this journey, right? And most of them might be from architecture school as well. So what advice would you give to these guys?
Be very curious always. Just do what you like, and just try to dig in, go as deep as you can, right? If you like to hand sketch, become the best hand sketcher you want to become. If you're interested in computational design, as it's what's called in architecture, well, start like immerse yourself, go straight into the ocean. Don't put your feet on the tub first. Just go deep, dive in 100 meters right away. Go for it. And I think the most important is to just be interested in something and go for it and see where life takes you with it. And
there's this meme where they show a mountain on the sea, and then the top of the mountain is only 10%, but beneath the sea it's like 90%, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Nicholas, I wish I could have you for a longer time, but I'm sure like you're pretty busy with your day, and you're a pretty busy guy and you have so much to learn as well. So we'll quickly jump into the quickfire round and then I'll let you go.
Perfect.
All right. So which book has inspired you the most?
Okay, I'll say 3 books.
All right, sure.
One called Emergence by Stephen Johnson. Fascinating. The other one is called Allure of Machinic Life by John Johnston.
Okay.
And the third one that I really liked was The Blind Watchmaker by Richard Dawkins.
Awesome. All right. Most of it is more related to technology and towards creativity in a way. Yeah.
Well, actually, there's another one that I'm reading very slowly that's called The Great War for Civilization. So it tells you all the modern history of the conflict in the Middle East and, the Western world. So that one I would also recommend.
All right. I'm sure you're watching a lot of interesting movies. So which movies would you consider your favorite?
Oh my God. Actually, I haven't watched the movie in a long time.
Okay.
But can I change it to series?
Yeah, sure. You watch a lot of Netflix, right?
Yeah. Well, I was really obsessed with Vikings. I really like it. And also Black Mirror.
Oh man, I knew you were going to say Black Mirror. Yeah.
But Vikings, man, oh my God, I'm really obsessed with it. I hope they release the final half of season 6 soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that we'd approach most of Black Mirror by the end of the century?
Man, I have no idea. I mean, for a lot of Black Mirror stuff is quite true now. Like the social media episode. Yeah. Well, it's not so radical now, but it's kind of true. Instagram is, kind of like that.
And what's your take on AGI, which is artificial intelligence with conscience?
Artificial intelligence with consciousness?
Yeah.
I think it's... but what do you mean with consciousness?
Like how humans, we have consciousness. We can think and we make sense of things. So there is AI and there's AGI. So they say that AGI would become a possibility by the end of the century.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that topic of consciousness is super complicated. I mean, there has been lots of philosophical writings about this. I mean, I wouldn't say, you can even ask if an ant is conscious or not, right? I mean, I don't think consciousness only belongs to humans. That's that's how I will answer the question.
But you're not scared of robots coming and replacing us or apprehensive of what would happen in the future, right? You're more optimistic, right?
Well, yeah, I'm half and half. I mean, I'm more scared of machine learning being used in a bad way. So, for example, to generate fake news, to generate fake information. It's already happening. That's what makes me scared. On privacy violations, on hardcore surveillance, China is already using this in a very nasty way. London is full of security cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
Like Cambridge Analytica, what happened with this? They tilted presidential campaigns. Yeah. They influenced Brexit. They made Trump, heavily influence the Trump campaign. That's what I'm really, really scared of. I mean, the rest of robots or machines doing other stuff that we shouldn't do, that has been, that's many examples in history, etc. But I think this is the most pressing matter that really makes me super worried.
All right. What type of music do you listen to, or what do you generally listen to?
That's quite a mix. Sometimes some electronic, or depends on my mood. But for example, when I like to code, I generally like to listen to different types of electronic music.
Which one's your favorite?
Let me give you some names. So for example, Martin Roth.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. Aleph is pretty cool, for example. Nicholas Jarre from Chile.
Nice.
Christian Loeffler.
Oh yeah, I listen to his a bit.
Yeah. Or Jimi Hendrix or Rolling Stones, or maybe some, more Latin music, but not generally when I'm working.
And do you go for
party?
These techno, Tomorrowland type events in Sweden?
No, in fact, no. I'm more like of a listener to techno, because generally like those techno parties, it's kind of heavy, it's always full of drugs and all of this. I've never been so much of a drug consumer.
All right.
So yeah, for parties, I actually prefer more like Latin music actually.
Okay.
To dance, like, yeah.
All right. Which city would you consider your favorite, considering you've been to so many cities, right?
Yeah, London. London by far is my favorite city.
All right. And I think I already asked you you already did mention about your daily routine. So my last question to you would be like, where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Manish, that's a scary question. I have no idea, man. I hope I will be somewhere interesting. I hope I will be alive. I hope I will be healthy. And I hope I will be doing something or trying to do something meaningful. And I hope I will be also surrounded by much, much, much smarter people than myself, so I can learn from them and just in a nice environment.
Awesome.
That's what I hope.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have you again 10 years from now, and then discuss like what you're up to then.
If the world hasn't ended. No, I'm joking.
All right. Thanks, Nicholas. I think that was, I personally learned a lot from that session. Thanks a lot for taking your time out and coming to the podcast. What's the best way our listeners could get in touch in case they would like to reach out to you?
Well, LinkedIn, any account. I mean, I don't know what information you will put, but Vimeo or LinkedIn or Instagram or I don't have Twitter. I think I should also get one.
Yeah, I think you should get into Twitter.
You can just reach out.
A lot of interesting people on Twitter, and they're pretty active too.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
it's true. Yeah, it's hard because it becomes another distraction. So looking at Twitter and blah blah blah. But definitely there's super active, and I think about that. I should do it.
Thanks for listening to the Ak Young Podcast. We're still building the community. Please share this knowledge with someone you know who could benefit. Just send them to arkyoung.com, where you'll find our free newsletter, and for more podcast episodes, search for the show on any major podcasting platform. Don't forget to subscribe where you're listening right now. And if you liked it, leave a rating or review.
I don't like to advertise a lot. I like to just provide high value, and I want to do that all the time. So I've created a course for you guys, and it also helps me in running the show. It's called the Complete Sketchup and Vray course for interior design. I'm also creating more courses, and it would be coming up in a few months' time. So if you want access to the course with a 95% discount, head to arkgyan.com/discount. And thanks for tuning in this long. I mean, it's awesome. You stayed even after the outro. Usually people leave, but this is for you since you stayed. A 95% discount. Just head to arkgyan.com/discount and it'll revert you to the Udemy website. Hope you find the course useful. I hope you found this podcast episode useful and awesome. Also head to our show notes if you want to explore more about computation, which is arkgyan.com/41. I'll see you in the next episode. This is your host, Manish Paul Simon, aka Kobe, signing off. Cheers.